Hello and welcome everyone. As you can see, we have the A320 sitting here on the table, and yeah, this thing is huge. It is bigger than I was expecting when you put the whole thing together and start working on it. So today we're going to cover probably the subject you are most interested in, and probably one of the most important videos that I've done of this series, and that is covering the subject of decals, how to put them on, some tips and tricks that I learned on how to do it. Because of how labor intensive they were to do, it's really probably easier to put all the decals on and then tell you what I have learned along the way, rather than trying to do it in the form of a how-to video and actually install them on camera. It took me probably a good solid 2 weeks, or maybe even longer, of just working on little bits of the airplane every so often when I had a chance. To try to tackle this all in like one sitting, where you're gonna sit down and just put every decal on, would be pretty labor intensive, and I really didn't have the time available to do that. So I broke it up into multiple sections here, but first I'm gonna go over kind of the steps and tools you're gonna need to get started. So first of all, you're gonna need the airplane, and you're gonna need all your decals. Whether or not those decals come from Cali Graphics, somewhere else that you come up with, you made them on your own, whatever it may be, you'll need the airplane, you'll need the graphics, and then you got to have all your painting done first. You do not want to do any painting after the decals are installed. The decals are really the last step before you seal it with a clear coat. So if you remember from previous videos, I reshot the entire fuselage in gloss white. It's not as glossy as I was actually hoping it to be. I may go back over it with some more gloss clear coat to kind of bring that shine out. But it has been repainted from the factory to a little bit of a matte finish, which is fantastic if you use it as a primer. Even if you're doing a white airplane like I did, I highly suggest repainting the entire aircraft. Use the factory bare white as a primer. You'll have much better results doing that than just going straight to applying the decals to the bare foam. Think of it as a primer, not as a top coat. You also remember that I pre-painted the vertical stab here with blue paint before adding the decals on. That turned out to be a really smart move, just because, you know, the leading edge, the top trailing edge, the hinge, in some area down here, it's you get a little areas that the decal doesn't fully conform over, or you get kind of gaps in it, because the decal is not really meant to be a full covering over every square inch of that surface. So I reshot the entire thing, then put the decal on, and the end result is great. Like, you really can't even tell where the paint ends and the decal is, even though that in person up close here I can see. One important thing to note, this little triangular section here, just where the servo is located for the rudder and linkage is there, that is painted whatever color your vertical stab is painted. So mine was white because I reshot the whole fuselage white. It is part of the fuselage. So make sure you go back over and paint that to match the tail accordingly, whatever color you choose. So when all your painting is done, let's go over what do you need to go ahead and get started on actually putting the decals on. So you got your decals, that's the most important thing. Then you're going to need a few tools along the way. Pair of scissors. I used a couple different pair. I had a straight pair like this. I also used some curved body scissors that you'd use for like an RC car Lexan body. Those work remarkably well when cutting out decals. So you can get yourself one of those, or if you've been in the hobby long enough and you have any RC car stuff, you probably had those scissors. Tamiya 3mm or 6mm tape. This stuff is fantastic. It's relatively low tack. I use it for like everything. Whether it is a painting project, a decal project, a full-scale car project, or an RC project, or even a scale plastic model, this stuff is the best stuff you can get. You'll need this to create a grid to know where to put the decals on. You will also need a measuring tape. This is kind of a like a sewing version of it. There's a couple of versions that you have. You know, I think any sewing supply place would have it, arts and crafts. You're going to need this because you're going to need to do some measurement over some curved surfaces, and this works remarkably well to do that. You'll also need a stand that can put the airplane on. I find it easier if you get a stand that is wide enough so that it gets out into this area of the fuselage. In fact, that's actually, I used a PVC stand when I did the decals on this, because it came out to this area here, which is well clear of this wing root area. And I also want to make sure that the airplane is level. I actually put a level on top here, made sure that the airplane was sitting straight. Makes it easier to eyeball things and kind of make sure things are straight. You can always check things with a level before putting the decals on, and having the airplane in a level state makes that significantly easier. You'll also need a cheap hair dryer, and I recommend a cheap, low-powered hair dryer. My wife picked this one up from Goodwill while traveling. She needed one, and this thing is really low power. It's got a low power setting and then a lower power setting down here on the bottom. It was $5 from a Goodwill, and this thing was exactly what I needed. I have a heat gun that I use for vinyl wrapping and things like that on full-scale cars, and that is not what you want to use on a foam airplane. That will blister the foam and cause all sorts of problems. So you'll want to pick up something like this. This is it is a gem. It is a Glamour Energy Magic one. So it will do magic when it comes to putting decals on a foam plane, which is what we're going to be using it for. Also, a couple zip ties, long enough zip ties so that it kind of wraps around at least the halfway point of the fuselage. I'll explain what that is for here in just a little bit. And then also the instruction manual. At the very end of the manual has a diagram of where a lot of the nomenclature decals go on the airplane, and there are a lot of them. So make sure you are ready to do that. You have a good, comfortable chair and lots of lighting, and ready to spend a good amount of time putting all those nomenclature decals on. And then lastly, what you won't have, but I'm going to help you with today, are pictures of where the factory decals are located and where to position things. So I'm going to help you with that portion of it, because you won't have that little piece of information. I had to reach out to a friend of mine who was able to get me that information. So thank you, Kevin, for doing that. That was a huge help, because that set the grid for how I did the decals. And I started with the tail decals here, and then I worked my way forward. Well, technically, I actually added the windshield decals first, because they're the easiest. They just simply go on the molded surface there. But the rest of the decals, the doors, the windows, all the logos, I started at the back and worked forward. And the reason is I had really good dimensions on the starting point for where that door is located at, and then door to the start of the windows, and then from there I could just simply go outbound until everything is on. So let's go ahead and talk about how to get started. Now that you have all your tools in place, you got your decals ready to go, let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, I started back here, and the reason is I had really good dimensions. So per the measurements that I had from Kevin, we're gonna go, you go 60 millimeters from the front of the leading edge here of the horizontal stab to the leading edge of the door. So your dimension is from here to the leading edge of the door. That is going to be 60 millimeters. That starts this plane of where you're going to start to build your grid. You're going to use this tape here, put a small, I'm talking maybe like, I don't know, half-inch long strip of tape, 60 millimeters up from the leading edge here. Just put that vertically, and that's going to be your starting point. But you don't know where it goes this direction, right? So we're going to measure that next. So 35 millimeters from the center line here is where you are going to, actually it's from, not center line, it is actually from the edge of the rudder. So you're going to come down here, you're going to measure 35 millimeters and lay a piece of tape. So now you have a horizontal tape and you have a vertical tape. You have basically the top of the door and the trailing edge of the door marked. So once again, 60 millimeters from this point to this point, 35 millimeters from this point down to here. That starts your grid. So then you just go ahead and pull the decal graphic off the transfer paper. You transfer it onto here and leave that, double check your measurements, obviously, before you go ahead, measure once, or measure twice, cut once type scenario. Make sure your measurements are good, then go ahead and affix your decal down, remove the transfer paper, and now you have the start of where to put your decals. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and measure from the leading edge of the door here up to the first window. So you're going to use your measuring tape here, and this is very complicated to do upside down, not easy. That's why it's easier to do this off the airplane. And you want to go 85 millimeters from the start of this door here all the way up to the first window. So you go ahead, you measure across, and then you lay a vertical piece of tape right at the 85 millimeter mark, and that's the back end of the rearmost window. And then the next step you're going to do is you're actually going to come up from this door, if I can find it down here, upside down. There it is right there. You're going to come from the leading edge of that door, and you're going to measure up to the bottom of the windows, and that dimension is 64 millimeters. You're going to lay a piece of tape along there. So now you have the start of a grid, right? You have your dimension here that will place the horizontal axis. You have 64 millimeters up from the top of the door to the bottom of the window. So now you can start to lay out a piece of tape there as well. So once you have that started, you can then actually go from the center line of the fuselage down to the top of the window. So I'll measure it on this one here, and it is actually measures at 100 millimeters down from the center line. And then what I did is I actually came across, every 8 inches or so, I'd measure, come down 100 millimeters, put a piece of tape, come down 100 millimeters, put a piece of tape. And what I'm doing is I'm establishing a horizontal axis through here to align all the windows. The windows are the most difficult part. Once you get the windows down, the rest of this is actually pretty easy, but your measurements are the most critical to get those windows not only positioned right, but also level. So use the center line of the fuselage, use this tape strip here, and just go down and measure every so often. Now remember, the battery hatch doesn't have a center line on it, so you have to skip that. So I usually went towards this section here and this section here, and all I'm trying to do is establish a straight line across. From here, you take your window decal and you lay it on here, and you line up the back of the window at your 80, I think it's, what did it say, 85 millimeters? Yeah, 85 millimeter piece of tape here. You come down, you get your vertical access, you put a piece of tape to hold the windows up here. Now remember, at this point, the backing and the transfer part of the decal are still attached. You haven't peeled that apart yet. They're still attached. You're just trying to establish where everything's at. So then I actually went ahead and taped that right to the fuselage, and then came over and lined up the next piece of tape that I put on here from my measurement from the center line down to the top of the window, put a piece of tape to hold that in place, and I just worked my way across, making sure that when I got to this end over here, that the top of the windows was exactly where that piece of tape was that I established as my top of window reference line. So once you have all of that marked out, I then would go across and grab a few areas of where the transfer paper was, where it had been cut, and I just lay some reference tape kind of all the way along here, top and bottom. Now I got this thing pretty well set where I can peel the backing material off. One thing I did is, after I had everything taped up here and ready to go, I actually split the decal. I actually split it right behind the emergency exit doors. And the reason is that this is a very long decal to try to do is one thing and get it right. So what I did is, before I took anything apart, I cut that decal right in this section here. And then I drew some lines on the transfer paper that I could line up, just some horizontal lines. That way I could get them lined up again. Then you go ahead and you remove the backing from the decals. You're left with the decal and the transfer. Go ahead and line that all up on your decal, or on your pieces of tape that you lay here, and go ahead and put that on. Before you peel your transfer off, do the next section, because remember, you drew some lines on here where the door and windows come together between the front half and the back half. So once you line those back up, put the front half window decals all on, making sure that along the way your window decals line up with every single one of those pieces of tape that you laid out here. You have to build a grid using this Tamiya tape to know where you're going to be at and make sure everything is lined up. Before you press it all down and peel it off and hit it with the heat gun, make sure you have everything nice and straight. And then you go ahead and just peel off the window transfer decal, and you're left with the rear door and all the windows up here. Now to do the fronts, you got a couple options here. I took the easy route. I took the doors from the factory decal sheet because they didn't have any of the NEO Airbus paint scheme on them, and the front door also had the front window as part of it. So what I did is I simply just cut the factory door decal out, but I stopped it right at the leading edge of the front window, and I also drew a little line on the with a piece of tape here on the decal of where the bottom of that window was. So now I just peeled that off, lined it up so that horizontally I'm at the front. The transfer is right at the front of the window here, and then I just simply lined it up with a piece of tape and went and stuck that on. Now, interesting enough, the factory decals seem to not stick all that well on the painted surface. I don't know exactly why. So once again, hit it with a little bit of low heat, and all of a sudden that adhesive will really start to dig in and grip. So don't be surprised if you come back the next day and it lifted in a few areas. Whoop! I have my helper here. I didn't know I was going to have a helper. So yeah, go ahead and use that factory decal as a cheat. You can use Cali's doors. Actually, Cali's doors are a little bit better than the factory ones, but I took the easy way out and went ahead and just used the factory ones and put those up here. They also have the latch on all the markings on it as one. Cali's doors are actually multiple pieces, where the nomenclature is actually separate than the doors. So you're going to have to go back in and put that on. So give me just a second here. I'm going to move my little helper out of the way here before he crashes the A320. All right. Well, he'll probably be back. He actually did quite a bit of helping on this, and I have to make sure not to get any cat hair underneath the decals. So once you have all your windows and you have your doors on, and that's going to be the same, pretty much any airliner you do. If you do an A320 airliner, you're going to have all those decals. Now, if you do a cargo version, let's say you did FedEx or a UPS or a DHL or something else, you probably could get by with saying, I'm not going to put any of the windows on here. I'm just going to do the doors. You don't have to worry about the windows. But I think most of you are probably going to be using this as an airliner and put all the windows on. And that is by far the most complicated part. Once you have that established, you also have nice set of vertical reference points for all the nomenclature decals. And like I said, there are a lot of them. And it's not necessarily easy to figure out where they all go. Unlike a warbird, if I was doing a B-17, I could find hundreds of books and pictures all over the world on every single rivet, every single marking, every single thing to replicate a B-17. Most military aircraft, you can do that with. This is actually surprisingly difficult to find exactly where they all go. Luckily, I had some help along the way that kind of helped me figure out where all the decals go for the nomenclature. What I'm going to do, rather than trying to go through all of them in the video, there's going to be a link in the description of this video that's going to take you to my Flickr page, and I'm going to take pictures of where all the nomenclature decals went on the airplane here. Then I'll do the fuselage, and I'll also have the wing on there as well. We're going to cover the wing in another video because the wing's actually a little bit easier. But I'm going to take pictures of where I put them. You may argue that that's not the right spot. I know that they're not exactly perfect. I had to use the reference material I had available to me to do these, and sometimes they were close in areas where I didn't have a good reference point of where it was at. Sometimes I was lucky enough where I could look and say, I got to count so many windows back, and then so far up and down on the fuselage goes the door marking or this placard or something there. I could use that reference point, but in some places the pictures were so up close on the airframe, I didn't have a good frame of reference of exactly where I was at spatially in the aircraft. And I'm also here to tell you that the aircraft is not symmetrical pilot to co-pilot side. The doors, the cargo doors, are not on both sides on the Delta A320. They may be on other A320s. So yours may be different than mine. That's okay. I can't guarantee you that every A320 is built exactly the same way. But in the aircraft that I was looking at replicating, this Delta Airlines model, the cargo doors, the big cargo doors, are really only on the co-pilot's side, not on the pilot's side. So they are going to be different between the two. In fact, I'll turn the airplane around here in a little bit. You can also see that there are actually decals on the bottom of the airframe as well. You're gonna have all these little ports down here. You're gonna have extra doors. I'm gonna rotate it one more time here. You also have this this blue decal here. This came in multiple pieces from Cali. This is where this thing is extremely helpful. You have a lot of complex surface to get on here. I was gonna paint this. I decided at the last minute to not paint it. Cali was cool enough to make me a multi-piece decal that I pieced together on here, and that worked remarkably well. It does not say Delta on here yet, because the Delta decal I have is actually a little too big for this section of blue, and I have found aircraft that have that and don't have that, so I don't know if I'm going to add that to it or not. But as you go through here, you will find that there are areas that are not perfectly symmetrical between the sides. So you may find that the instruction booklet kind of makes it seem that way, but I think in reality they're not exactly symmetrical. So make sure you try to research your exact airplane to get it right. You may also notice I have a little bit of weathering back here by the APU, and also the back of the APU on the very tail here is an exhaust vent, so it's going to have that heated stainless steel look to it. So that's done with jet exhaust. There are two lights in the back. Make sure you don't paint over those lights. That will certainly be a mistake. But I did do just a tiny bit of weathering down there. I've also did just a little bit of weathering around the doors here as well. Airliners tend to be very clean anyway, but you can see I did just a little bit of weathering here around the door where you would see the tube goes up and connects there for boarding. But for the most part, I kept this airplane remarkably clean, just because of the fact that airliners really aren't that dirty. It's not a fighter plane. As they age, yes, they start to get pretty nasty, but I want to make this one a pretty fresh out of the factory A320 here, so it does not have a lot of wear and tear, not a lot of chips on it, not a lot of weathering. So then you can add, of course, whatever livery you're doing. I did Delta, so you see I have the Delta decals up here. I have the tail letters. I have the American flag on here. So that will vary based on whatever you're doing. The Delta scheme to me is probably one of the easiest ones to do. That doesn't mean this is a very easy project. It's actually remarkably tough to do. If you're not used to doing stuff like this, you may run into problems. But take your time, think about what you're doing, build out a grid using that Tamiya tape, and you'll find out this actually isn't that bad. It's just a little bit more difficult than a lot of airplanes that you're probably used to. And if you've never done an airplane before, this could seem very intimidating. Just take your time, think about what you're trying to do, mark everything you can with this Tamiya tape first, because you can always move the tape around before you put the decals on. Take your time, don't get into a rush. You'll be rewarded with a really awesome looking airplane. And I do have to say, make sure you have a good spot to work. The airplane's much bigger than I was expecting it to be. In fact, the area that I did a lot of the decals on, I went to go put the wing on and rotate it up, and the wing actually hit part of the ceiling, because I have a low-hanging ceiling where the HVAC ducts run through, and I was like, whoa, I gotta watch the little winglet on there. So make sure you have yourself a big area that you can work on the airplane, and you can kind of spread out. And like I said, just take your time. Make sure you get as much supporting documentation as you can. That will help a lot. Use the reference pictures and that I have included in the link below on where everything that I positioned at. I guarantee you somebody's going to comment that I got something wrong. Yeah, there's probably a good chance that I got something in the wrong spot. It is, like I said, it is more difficult than I expected to find good reference information on where everything goes on these airplanes. So I fully expect somebody is going to tell me how wrong I did it, because that's, well, it's the internet and that's what you guys do. So yeah, that wraps up pretty much where we're at on decaling the fuselage. Like I said, there will be a follow-up video that will be on the wings and the engines. There's a lot less decals and a lot less complexity that goes on with those. This is the most complicated part, putting the windows on. Once you get past the windows, it's really just taking the time to put all the rest of the decals on. The windows are the hardest part. They're the thing that you really want to make sure you take your time, think about what you're doing, build out that grid, make sure you got it nice and level, then go ahead and stick them down. And once they're on, yeah, you got something that looks pretty cool. And now you got something that looks like an airliner. You got something that you can use as a reference. You can count how many windows forward, back something is, and you can use that for your reference points for everything else. So if you want to do how I did it, you start with the rear door, you measure up from the door, you start your rear window, and then you work your way all the way forward, put on your front door, and then do all the rest of your decals. So if you guys got any questions at all, leave them in the comments below. I will do my very best to help out and answer in any way I can. Like I said, the link to where I put the nomenclature decals will be in the description below. It'll take you out to my Flickr page where that is going to be located. And yes, I'm guaranteed they're not all exactly correct, and I am sure somebody will point that out accordingly. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get those pictures taken so I can get them posted, and then also go grab the wings and the engines and talk through the decals on those. Thanks again for watching, guys. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye. Matey. Hey, Bootsy.